Hello, my name is Ned, and I'm the host of Black Box Online Radio. Welcome to the Debunking series, where I'm talking about some Zodiac killer suspects that I think are absolutely not the Zodiac killer. First, I would like to give a shout out to the Creepypasta, who recommended this episode today. Why not do one on George Hill Hodel as a Zodiac killer suspect? The Creepypasta was also someone who recommended Jack Torrance that came out 2 weeks ago, and I just have to say, Creepypasta, keep up the excellent recommendations because this one got me very curious, and I was thinking a lot about all the reasons why I don't think that George Hill Hodel was the Zodiac killer. George Hill Hodel is perhaps more famous for being a suspect in the Black Dahlia mystery. He comes to prominence, fame in the 21st century, mostly through accusations that have been made by his son, Steve Hodel, accusing his own father of not only murdering the Black Dahlia, Elizabeth Short, back in the 1940s, but also being the Zodiac killer, as well as more than 25 murders. And these have been documented in Steve Hodel's books, Black Dahlia Avenger, Most Evil, Parts 1 and 2, and so on. And I believe that Steve Hodel has a new book coming out called The Early Years, where he will talk about George Hill Hodel and his activities prior to the murder of Elizabeth Short. Back in 2020, in maybe January or February, I concluded my first book discussion on this channel, and I was looking for a Zodiac killer book that I wanted to examine, and I was very tempted to do a full multi-part discussion on Steve Hodel's Most Evil Part 2 to talk about George Hill Hodel as a Zodiac killer suspect. And let's go through some of the points that I would have shared if I had indeed done that book discussion. Point number one. I don't believe that Steve Hodel's presentation on his father, George Hill Hodel, who was a doctor, Dr. Hodel, I don't believe that he even intends to show that his father was indeed the Zodiac killer. It is more about a compare and contrast. And even if you go over to Steve Hodel's YouTube channel and look at some of his commentary on the Zodiac killer case, you can hear certain linguistic characteristics like, okay, my father, the Black Dahlia Avenger, was George Hill Hodel. Now let's compare him to the Zodiac killer. Paraphrasing, but you get the general idea. There's a lot of certainty in the language around his father being the Black Dahlia Avenger. And in all fairness, George Hill Hodel is somewhat of a viable suspect in the murder of Elizabeth Short. When it comes to the Zodiac killer mystery, it's a bit more difficult. Next reason, George Hill Hodel was born in the early part of the 20th century, in the first decade of the 20th century. In 1968 and 1969, he would have been in his 60s. And I am very critical of anybody who is promoting a suspect who was in their 60s at the time of the Zodiac killer crimes. Mike Mageau, the surviving victim of the Blue Rock Springs shooting, talked about a 25-year-old suspect. And Steve Hodel has commented on Black Box Online Radio before and addressed this very issue, saying that even though George Hill Hodel was in his early 60s at the time of the Zodiac crimes, he could have easily passed for 40. He looked 20 years younger. The people who promote older suspects make comments like that, and I guess that's an appropriate response. But 25? A 60, 61, 62-year-old man is going to pass for 25? That's a bit of it's too much of a stretch. Also, Brian Hartnell, the surviving victim from the Lake Berryessa stabbing, said that the voice that he heard, remember the Zodiac is wearing the hooded costume at Lake Berryessa, said that the hooded costume voice behind that mask was maybe 20 to 30 years old. All right, now you have a guy who is in his 60s being mistaken for possibly a 20-year-old. I also think that that is a strike against George Hodel and any other suspect that is going to be in his 60s. One of the points that Steve Hodel addresses about how and why the Zodiac persona was created was going back to the 1967 murder of Lucilla Lalou in the Philippines, which I have an episode about here on this channel. And Lucilla Lalou was the first chop chop lady of the Philippines. Her body was dismembered, her body was cut to pieces, decapitated, and if I recall correctly, I believe to this day they never were able to recover her head. And Lucilla Lalou's body was found 500 meters from a street in the Philippines named what? Zodiac. Now, I will accept everything that Steve Hodel has put forward. He can place George Hill Hodel in the Philippines. All right, he committed the dismembering murder of Elizabeth Short, and he mutilated her body. And then you look at the similarity between that crime and the murder of Lucilla Lalou in the Philippines. Maybe we could talk about that, and I do have an episode about that here on this channel. But the connection between the Zodiac killer and the murder of Lucilla Lalou is a little bit difficult because it's just a place name. I mean, are you going to go through every type of using of the word Zodiac and see that somebody crossed paths with it? We have the word Zodiac written on watches. We have the Ford Zodiac. We have the Zodiac character in the Charlie Chan A Treasure Island movie. There are all sorts of ways that you can definitively state that the word Zodiac has crossed paths with other people. Why does it only have to be George Hill Hodel in the murder in 1967? Why only that? And let alone, there is also the explanation that there is no exact reference to the murder of Lucilla Lalou in the Zodiac letters. There is no reference to the Zodiac Street in the Philippines. There's no reference directly to the Philippines. But one thing that I was reading recently about Steve Hodel and some of his claims in the Zodiac Killer mystery is that he incorporated the radian theory into his Zodiac claims. That Gareth Penn published a book in 1987 called Time 17 that says if you put a radian, an angle of 57.29 degrees, on top of Mount Diablo, one arm of the radian will go to Blue Rock Springs Park, and one arm of the radian will go to Presidio Heights, where Paul Stine was murdered. Darlene Ferrin was murdered at Blue Rock Springs Park on July 4th of 1969. Paul Stine was murdered in Presidio Heights on October 11th of 1969. And Steve Hodel actually said that the radians could match up to a place where Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, was also murdered. However, in the graphic that was made available on ZodiacKillerFacts.com, the definition of radian that was provided in the graphic was 59 degrees, not 57.29, so that's an instant strike against Steve Hodel's presentation. But also that the radian theory is almost certainly incorrect because it doesn't even come out to a flat 57.29 degrees. That would have to go to Blue Rock Springs Golf Course, and the arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs Golf Course, not to Blue Rock Springs Park, where Darlene Ferrin was actually murdered. And it's more about concerning radians and inches along the radians, not the ultimate destination of where the radians are going to end up. So with this one, I'm seeing something that is a repetitive process, where somebody has a suspect in a major true crime event, someone who perhaps could even be guilty of a major true crime event, but then they're trying to connect that suspect to a different set of homicides that most likely they didn't do. It's like taking true facts, but then sort of weaving them together with some fictitious connections. And you're going to have to do a lot better than just finding some similar names or finding some similar angles and just drawing your own angles on a map. You could do that with anything. And not to mention, one point, though, that I believe Steve Hodel did refute for this channel, that George Hill Hodel cut up Elizabeth Short's body, allegedly, with surgical skill, surgical precision. He was an expert in various forms of medical knowledge, and he was trained in surgery, but I don't believe he was actually a surgeon, but someone can correct me on that later if I misstated. Yet, where's the evidence of surgery used in any of the crimes? Where is the evidence that a doctor had anything to do with the Lake Herman Road murders, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and the Stein murder in Presidio Heights? At Lake Berryessa, the Zodiac killer had Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard tied up, hog-tied, hands tied behind their back to their feet, to their legs, or rather, and they were stabbed. Not an ounce of medical knowledge was present in there because Brian Hartnell survived the Lake Berryessa stabbing. Cecilia Shepard survived for 2 days and then passed on later in the hospital. So that might not be the strongest point. I think the absolute strongest point is what I said at the very beginning. It's a fascinating discussion to try and compare and contrast the different serial killers. But also, I think that if we need to draw a very clear line and just say that, it's just comparing them. It's just doing the comparison as an activity to study human behavior, to study how people function, to make observations. Okay, this serial killer did this and this serial killer did that. Some of the comparisons that Steve Hodel has mentioned online is that the Black Dahlia Avenger and the Zodiac both brought pre-cut lengths of rope to crime scenes. They both wrote letters. How many people have done that? Pre-cut lengths of rope? Well, what are you going to do? Bring the whole wad? Of course people are going to bring pre-cut lengths of rope if they're going to be involved in some type of crime doing that. And as for letter writing, numerous serial killers write letters. Not only the Zodiac, not only the Black Dahlia Avenger, the Son of Sam, that guy Maury Travis that was doing weird stuff in his basement. I mean, people do this. They write in letters taking credit for crimes that maybe they committed, maybe they didn't commit. We just had the revelation that the Sherry Joe Bates letters that said Bates had to die, there will be more, signed with a Z, were hoaxes fabricated by a teenager in 1967. Sometimes people write letters taking credit for crimes that they don't commit. Many people send those things in. I don't think that is significant of any single fact or conclusion. So, what I would want to do is, I would want to approach something like Most Evil Part 2 as a genuine mental exercise, a genuine exercise in human behavior. Make no mistake, even though this video is done in the debunking series, I am still completely interested, captivated, fascinated, and enthralled by the comparisons and the contrasts, looking at the similarities between the Black Dahlia Avenger and the Zodiac Killer. And I think that those will be some very, very valuable explorations that we can do. But were the Zodiac murders actually committed by Dr. George Hodel, who was a major suspect in the Black Dahlia Avenger case? I'm going to vote for most likely not. But what do you think? Put your ideas down in the comment section below. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and this was one that was requested by one of the listeners. If you have anything that you would like to hear about on the channel, you can put your idea in the comment section as well. Any suspects that you would like included in the debunking series, please put your suspect down below, and if I agree with you, they may appear here on this channel. Alright, that's all for me now. Until next time.